On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm joined by XJ, the co-host of the fantastic Hot Hand Theory podcast, to answer some big questions, including, do the Knicks still have a championship ceiling?
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin, Schall. I'm your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and of course, the Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast. If you're listening to this Tuesday morning, I just filled in and hosted the Monday edition of the Locked On NBA podcast, so please go check that out. But if you don't know where you are right now, let me help you out. This is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week. And be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. But if you're a real sicko and that's not enough for you, well, I want to remind you that the Locked On Knicks podcast now has a Locked On Knicks newsletter. That's right. We're introducing the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com to get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter and get writing from Alex and I, our team of national writers here at Locked On. And of course, the latest and greatest in fantasy basketball with Josh Lloyd. We're getting into a whole bunch of fun stuff with XJ today. This one it was too long of a conversation to fit into one podcast, so it's going to be two parts. I believe the plan is to put those both out today. If not, you will have to wait till Friday, but I think in all likelihood, both parts are going to come out today. We're going to discuss the Knicks ceiling, whether the recent play of OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges is sustainable even when Jalen Brunson comes back. If this team is actually capable of incorporating all their best players playing at their best simultaneously, and does this core work together at the end of the day? What are the options if it doesn't? We get into it all with XJ in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, without further ado, let's get into it with XJ. All right, guys, as promised, I am lucky enough to be joined by the fantastic co-host of perhaps my favorite NBA podcast, the Hot Hand Theory pod. XJ, welcome back, buddy. Good to talk to you again. It's been a little while. How's everything going? How you feeling about our Knicks right now?
I mean, everything's going great for me. You just gave me the ultimate flattering that I didn't expect. Favorite pod. That's high praise.
It's in the Knicks, man. I don't know. Zach Lowe's coming back, so you'll have some competition, but it's up there.
But yeah, no, I'm doing well. I'm actually excited. Maybe this is a little bit of a foreshadowing. I'm excited about the Knicks situation and think that we've seen really good things without Brunson, and looking forward to talking about all those things with you here today.
Yeah, I felt like on top of the fact that I needed a guest today, I felt like today it was a great time to talk to you, because I think a lot of the things that we've touched on in previous episodes by force of hand via Jalen Brunson ankle turning the wrong direction have kind of come to fruition with this team. Like we did get Deuce McBride as a starter. I think we both agree our preferred version of that is him off the ball versus him being kind of forced to play point guard. But we got that until he tragically got hurt as well. We've gotten better usage for Mikal Bridges. We've gotten better usage for OG Anunoby. We've gotten earlier setups for Karl Anthony Towns. And the question now is, like, does that sustain when Jalen Brunson comes back? And that's a question we're going to get into a little later in the episode, because I wanted to start broader and touch on some of those themes and then zoom in on that. After the longest intro ever, I'll give you my question. Do you think, because you and Jeff have been kind of adamant all season long that, hey, this team has a championship ceiling, they're just not being deployed properly. Do you still believe that? Where I feel like I don't want to make a universal statement, but the general gauge I get from people who cover this team was that type of optimism existed earlier this season, and it is no longer really there. And people are mostly looking forward to a competitive second round series against the Boston Celtics as the ceiling of this team. But what do you feel on that?
I am not a fan of kind of changing that approach to changing the idea for what the trajectory of the team should be, especially as we've seen how they've played without Brunson. And if anything, to answer your question really shortly, I do think that this team does still have a championship ceiling based on talent alone, and talent in particular. And I think this stretch without Brunson has done nothing but provide us with more evidence to that case. How many teams do we think can lose at this point, perennial MVP level player, a guy who is their best offensive player in the league, not replace him with anyone. It's not like they lost Jalen Brunson and replaced him with a slightly worse version of Jalen Brunson, or lost Jalen Brunson and backfilled him with, Julius Randle or something like that. They just lost Jalen Brunson. Purely, he's gone. They went from 6th in the NBA in point differential, plus 5.4 points per 100 possessions before the Jalen Brunson injury, to 8th in the NBA in point differential, plus 5.9 points per 100 possessions. So they've gotten slightly better in terms of pure point differential over that stretch. And that is ridiculous. That is not supposed to be able to happen across 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, across 12 games. You're not supposed to be able to lose an MVP candidate level player and get slightly better relative to the league in terms of point differential. So to me, if anything, this has just shown that they can optimize these players a lot better, as we've seen. You mentioned Mikal with OG, with Towns at various points of the season has been better or worse deployed. Deuce McBride, when he's gotten in the game, ways that they've deployed Josh Hart in particular, not just how much he plays, but the way in which he plays. All of those things have room for improvement. And if you're taking off an MVP candidate off your team and you just don't get worse at all, in fact, you get slightly better over a 12 games sample, that doesn't indicate to me you don't have enough talent. That indicates to me you have a surplus of talent to be able to compete.
Yeah, and I think the only question that comes to that for my mind, and why I'm not sure, I would say this Knicks team, maybe an important qualifier with Tom Thibodeau as the coach, has a championship ceiling, is I question if all those things could come together at the same time. But this is more of a broader theory question. Maybe the answer is obvious if you think they have a championship ceiling. And I asked the question, what would it take for you to consider this season a success? Presumably a championship, or maybe even just a run to the finals, is what it would take. But you guys, I know over on Hot Hand Theory, are so process-based. And someone asked me that question earlier today when we were doing a crossover with the Locked On Cavs podcast. And I took a second and I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know if this season can be considered a success at this point. Look, obviously if they came around and won a title, great. But because I personally think, and I think you think, the process from day one with this group has been really flawed, and they found, I think, much better process these last 12 games to compensate for the loss of talent. Because again, Tom Thibodeau was put into a corner, and whatever you want to say about Tom Thibodeau, he is multiple times as the Knicks coach, dug himself out of the grave by figuring out better process, figuring out more optimal usage for different guys when facing with an injury, or when faced with a long losing streak, or just some kind of general strife. I ask all that to ask, again, very long prelude for a simple question. What would it take for you to consider this season a success at this point?
It's a great question, and you got to cut yourself some slack, because I think all of that prelude was really important for the context of the question. And I will say this, just to speak directly to the Locked On Knicks listeners. I added an important caveat in my answer to your question about whether the Knicks are still title contenders. I said, if you'll notice, you can rewind it. I said on the basis of talent alone. And so on the basis of talent alone, I think they're title contenders, but the deployment has been the biggest issue. And given that addition of the way that they're deployed, I don't think they're likely to be able to get to that championship ceiling. And along those lines, success on this season, like you said, with myself, with my co-host Jeff, being more process oriented, I don't really look at a finishing place of second round, conference finals appearance. Those wouldn't be the metrics that I would use to determine what success looks like. What I would use is really to see what the team looks like given after this stretch without Jalen Brunson, the way they've played a much more egalitarian style of basketball, especially offensively, going from 22nd in passes per game with Jalen Brunson to 9th in passes per game without Jalen Brunson, going from first in average dribbles per touch with Jalen Brunson to 17th in average dribbles per touch without Jalen Brunson. If we were to see their process be a little bit improved, there to be some spacing principles that are accentuated a little bit more than they have been throughout the season, the Knicks compete in a way that looks to maximize their players, I would be okay if the Knicks lost because they missed shots or the other team got red hot from three and just shot them out of the building and they lost in the second round. I wouldn't just necessarily write it off as a second round loss is not sufficient for this team. It really depends on the process. But I think if you were to really try to make me nail down on where I think this team should go based on the talent that they have, it is an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and losing only to the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Boston Celtics, I think would be a valid loss to me without considering some kind of luck-based performance by the opponent who got really hot and shot well across 7 games. So that's kind of where I'd be at in my long answer to your long question.
Perfect. That's appropriate. All right, guys, we're going to continue with XJ in just a sec, talking about the two wings. How sustainable is their play? We get into that next on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, hey, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. They offer surprising insights. When I first started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. They also offer all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. They also give you the option for easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all that stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. I'm in a similar place. I think if I have some specifics, like to your point, like I'm better process, like try starting Deuce, continue to employ more or a higher organized offense rate when Jalen Brunson's back. I want to see Mikal, OG, and Cat hold their own in that series against the Boston Celtics. Because to me, that speaks to like the how you string this all together, and that is like, do the Knicks have a championship core? And if the answer is no, do they have an easy pivot off that? Whether that is a different head coach or whether that is trading one of the non-Jalen pieces or multiple of the non-Jalen pieces to sort of reorganize. I was almost going to say reorganize the deck chairs, but that is a bad connotation. But to create a roster where you can optimize everyone simultaneously. And after teasing that, I feel like through the first 10 minutes or so of this podcast, I want to actually get into it now. So we've seen to our previous reference that OG Anunoby, he's been a much better player these last 12 games, 22, 5-2 on 48% from the field. I believe 39% from three, 88% from the line over those 12 games. Last 6 games for OG, 28 points per game, 56, 41, 97 shooting splits. Mikal, similarly, he's been a monster since the trade, an efficient 22 points per game. More importantly, those two guys have just been incorporated, and it feels like their skill sets have been maximized. Do you think it is possible, if not at the same volume, to maintain a facsimile of what they're currently doing on the court when Jalen Brunson's back? Because to me, like, that is sort of the whole question with this team. And if the answer is no, like, you are looking at some inevitable either coaching or substantial roster changes after this season.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, these guys are not going to score at the rate that they've scored without Jalen Brunson when Jalen Brunson comes back. Like it's just there's not an ability to do that with the old adage of there being one basketball. It's true. There's literally one basketball. That being said, can they get these guys as involved as they have been? Can they maximize these guys with Jalen Brunson on the court as well? I absolutely think so. And the blueprint to me really is a game that I'll go back to, that I've continuously gone back to this season. The first game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the first half
I just
of
want
that
you to note,
game.
XJ, I have that exact same thing in my notes, but go
No
ahead.
way, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, I was a fill-in co-host for Locked On Knicks before, so maybe you rubbed off on me,
There we
Gavin.
go.
So I just think that's such an important game, because it showed how OG and Mikal were really featured early in the shot clock in that game. The Knicks were trying to push the pace, and they would take advantage of OG and Mikal's ability to finish on the inside and to take advantage of smaller players that were guarding them and being able to score earlier on in possessions. And then as it got later into the shot clock and there's time to kind of create something from nothing, then you can see a little bit more featuring Jalen Brunson and his skill set being able to take over and being less of a sort of spacer for those other guys scoring on the interior and being more of the creator who can score in a phone booth and a shoebox, whatever, analogy you want to give. That is sort of the formula to me, and that allows you to take advantage of everyone's strengths. And I don't think you'd have guys that are feeling like they're not being fed, as I think we've kind of felt whispers of from an OG Anunoby of, knowing that he's come to the Knicks wanting to show his offensive skill set. He's gotten the opportunity to do that. I don't think he's going to be okay with going back to kind of being parked in the corner and just focusing on his defensive abilities. And I think you can incorporate all three of these guys and Karl-Anthony Towns and have those guys be really high performers if you follow that blueprint that they did in that first Oklahoma City game, of the first half particularly, because the second half wasn't great.
Yeah. I'm feeling a lot of the same things, and I don't know if Tom Thibodeau is the coach to do that, because I think a lot of times this year, like you guys always reference it with Deuce McBride being a part of the Knicks top 6 lineups this year, like the Knicks have had like stretches of success where it feels like everything clicks, and it is almost as if Tibbs does not recognize the success or does not trust the success or is too risk averse to just go like a little further down that path. Like, hey, you cracked the door to enlightenment. It's like, nah, I just kind of want to go back to my old life. Like I was comfortable there. and I'm just, I have my doubts whether or not we will see more of that. But as much as like, I think I've been prone at times to put this on the feet of Tom Thibodeau. One, like he has been much better and he has changed things up substantially. Like we've seen Mikal Bridges, like far more off-ball action for him. And I think the greatest indicator of the point you were making is like Mikal, I mean, OG as well, but even more so Mikal is like such a rhythm-based player. And you would think, to your point, without like the most heliocentric player in the NBA in terms of like possession, total amounts of like ball handling per game in Jalen Brunson, like Mikal Bridges would inevitably get less efficient, right? Like that would be the assumption when he has to step up and be the number one guy or the co-number one with OG and Cat. Like his efficiency is going to fall off. And yet like the opposite's been true. Pre-injury, whatever the amount of 62 games, 56% EFG for Mikal Bridges, 60.2%, effective field goal percentage. Since the injury, his volume of pull-ups have gone up dramatically. 43.5% of his shots are pull-ups versus 30% before the injury. 57% effective field goal percentage on those shots versus just 44%. And I think that's because they're getting him the ball on the move. They are consistently like weaponizing him against slow-footed drop bigs. We saw it the entire second half against the Blazers with Donovan Clingan, where like over and over again, it was have Josh Hart come up, set a screen, Mikal attack it, hit that fadeaway, look like a poor man's Kevin Durant over and over again. He's even more effective at the rim, which is kind of the most surprising one because so many of his shots at the rim were just kind of off cuts and were easy layups, but 74% effective field goal percentage at the rim post-Brunson injury, 67% pre-Brunson injury. And to your point, like I think Tom Thibodeau, like when you are incorporating organized offense, particularly like for Mikal, even more so than OG, like you need to call plays for him because Jalen Brunson is already, just by the fact that he's bringing the ball up the court and by the fact that he's Jalen Brunson and by the fact that everyone is going to defer to him at the end of games, like you don't, obviously I'm not complaining when they run like a horn set or a dribble handoff for him or get him the ball on the move. Obviously all that stuff is additive, but in terms of guys who like need a bump and need a boost, like you have to conscientiously incorporate Mikal Bridges. You have to conscientiously like say, hey, we're going to set an off-ball screen for OG Anunoby with the smallest player on the court. Like if they get the Bucks in the first round, whoever Damian Lillard's on, probably Mikal Bridges. He's screening for OG and OG is sealing Damian Lillard. And we've seen like he set up Precious Achiuwa for that dunk, like off of a switch on Simons, because the Blazers panic and sent 3 guys, because if not, OG's going to put Simons in the stanchion. Like we've seen OG have a lot of success, like maybe more so than any point in his career, just facing up and attacking off a jab step. Again, if a weak defender's on him, like just get him the ball and let him go to work. And look, there's more to this, and we can continue going down this road. But the point is, like, you have to like dramatically emphasize those guys' involvement, because Jalen like just doesn't need as much of that. And to me, if there's a recognition there from Tom Thibodeau, it should be that. And I think I'll let you go further on this because I'm rambling now. I think that recognition also has to come from Jalen Brunson, and we can't say that it's only on Tom Thibodeau, because we've seen Tyler Kolek in campaign help those guys have a lot of success simply by getting off the ball quickly, which if Jalen has a flaw as a point guard, I would say it's that. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up with XJ continuing to talk how to best optimize this team. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out all the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. They give you easy ticket shopping. I just checked out the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. The Knicks have a lot of big home games to wrap up their season. So if you want to get to MSG, Game Time Picks is the way to go, because they highlight super deals. It gives you the best bang for your buck. And the most important part to me is the peace of mind. With seat fees before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And, I'm not going to attribute blame. Like, I don't really feel, in the space to do a blame pie right now. But I will say something that's emblematic of how much of a problem I think that this is, I'll harken back to another game earlier in the season, and it's the Knicks against the Hawks in the NBA Cup game, where the Knicks lost a game that I thought going in that they should win by 20 points. And part of the biggest issue with that game is that if there was a spot where we would see Mikal Bridges really his skill set accentuated and kind of see the team go to him more often, you would think it would be in a game where Dyson Daniels is the opposing perimeter defender on Jalen Brunson and Trae Young is the opposing perimeter defender on Mikal Bridges. And now if you could choose, I don't know about you, Gavin, if I could choose Jalen Brunson taking Dyson Daniels one-on-one or Mikal Bridges taking Trae Young one-on-one, both with space, I'm going to probably take Mikal Bridges. And that's definitely a reductive simplification of the game. But in many ways, it's emblematic of a problem that the Knicks have had, to me, which is that idea that you just spoke of, where we're not identifying where the advantage is if it's not Brunson. It is the offense is default to Brunson creating something, as opposed to taking a beat and recognizing where the actual advantage is. And in many nights, it's going to be teams putting their weakest defender on either Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby, and those guys with space around them can definitely finish at the rim. Actually, people don't recognize this, but Mikal Bridges has been one of the best transition players in the league this season in terms of his ability to finish in transition. And I think that's part of why his rim percentages have gone up so much, is specifically his work in transition. And then OG Anunoby is suddenly using his strength and length that he's always used defensively to his advantage offensively, like we've never seen before. And you just mentioned having Simons on him and what he would have done if the Blazers have let that situation. That is what OG is starting to do reliably, consistently, and with confidence. And if you have those alternative options, we haven't really talked about Karl Anthony Towns to this point in terms of what he can do aside from Jalen Brunson, but you had those alternative options. You cannot only be going to them in these very minute situations that don't come often, and only when Tibbs decides to call a play, or only when Brunson decides I need to actively get these guys involved for this one possession early in the game. That is just not sufficient, especially against some of the defenses that that the Knicks are going to see in a playoff situation with these very smart coaches who know exactly what the Knicks want to do. And if you give them a steady diet of the same thing over and over again, you will get exploited despite having an MVP level offensive player in Jalen Brunson. And so that is something we need to see carry over if the Knicks hope to advance deep into the playoffs.
And look, and this almost feels like an unspoken qualifier when we're both on the podcast. I give you and Jeff the most credit for it because you guys were screaming it from the rooftops from day one. But all of that looks a lot better with Deuce McBride out there, because with Josh Hart out there, you can make all these adjustments. And against the defense as good as the Celtics, as good as the Cavs, like I maybe more so against the Cleveland, because you do actually have some weak points to attack. But against Boston, like I don't think it makes any difference, even if you run this stuff. If Josh Hart is with the starting lineup, is Boston just going to be too smart in terms of how they help off him, having one of the best rim protectors in Kristaps Porzingis hovering around the rim at all times. And there's just not going to be a way to do this efficiently enough. And look, even if you get to go 5 out and attack Boston one-on-one, that's not a guarantee of success, because the Celtics, along with the Thunder, are like uniquely built to hold up against that and say, fine, you want to go at Drew Holiday, you want to go at Derek White, you want to go at Jason Tatum, like we will survive that. But why make things easier on a defense that is so incredibly talented? And I just look to, and I know this is a point you've been making all season, but like in the process of my Locked On NBA duties, I was watching Thunder Pacers, and I have, unlike you, not watched a ton of Oklahoma City this season. And I was wowed because they went to Chet was out for the game. Isaiah Hartenstein hurt his hip at halftime, so he was out. So like, all right, that's fine. They're going to play Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam. We are going with Kenrich Williams at center. And Indiana hurt them like a little bit with that. Like they were able to post up Turner. Siakam was able to get some short shots. But overall, the Thunder dominated those minutes because they had elite perimeter defenders. And on offense, like even when Shea was out of the game, like with legitimate 5-out spacing against, and not that Indiana's like a perfect defense, but they're pretty good this year. They're something like 13th, 15th in defense. Like there was no chance. Like even someone like Alex Caruso could find the weak point, which was Tyrese Halliburton, and say, I'm not a great one-on-one player, but I am an NBA point guard, and with a completely spread floor, I can go one-on-one. And now that we've seen how good OG can be attacking one-on-one, how good Mikal can be attacking a drop big, how dangerous Cat can be, if he's not double teamed, like he's one of the most efficient high volume scorers in the NBA, even though he's like doubled and tripled about as frequently as any player in the league. What happens if those guys have actual spacing? And yes, again, I'll say it one more time. It's plausible that's not enough against Boston, but we've seen Oklahoma City beat Boston twice. Maybe try that formula. So I know this is the ultimate example of preaching to the choir, but I think that's a caveat that's worth noting, even though I know we both talked about it ad nauseum.
Oh no, I you're preaching to the choir, but I could listen to this preaching all day. Like I don't have a problem with it. I think to add on to that, I will say this. I do think with a spaced floor and gaps to attack, guys who we don't think of as like great scorers and isolation and creators, they look a lot better. They look a lot better. And that is the thing that we've learned. I mean, you know, Memphis just fired their coach in Taylor Jenkins, but the guy that they put in place has helped implement a lot of these principles about, you know, how to space and respace, and this emphasis on spacing on the court is there from all the best coaches in the league. When we talked about Mark Dagnall, when we talk about Joe Mazzulla, these guys focus deeply. They're deeply passionate about getting the spacing right. And the reason is it just makes life easier for everyone. It makes life easier for everyone. And if you can get that right, guys who aren't necessarily that great or that elite, like a Jalen Brunson, he can score against anyone in any situation. You don't have to be that good to be highly effective as long as the spacing is right and you have gaps to attack and get to the rim. And so I think that's why it's so important and something that just purely does need to be emphasized if the Knicks are going to be maximized and we're going to see the best version of them.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap up part 1 with XJ. In part 2, we talk about if this core actually works, and if not, what are the solutions and how the current roster could be further maximized. But until then, I'm Gavin Schall. He's XJ. Be sure to subscribe to the Hot Hand Theory podcast, and of course, continue to stick with us over at Locked On Knicks.